Welcome to Where the F is My Village, a new podcast hosted by me, Stefanie Ferris, and Shelley Academy. If you're raising a tricky kid and you know who you are, your home life is likely a dumpster fire. And when it feels like it's only your home that is a dumpster fire, who can you even talk to about it? If you've been looking for your people, you have found them. Welcome to our village, where we hope you can feel supported and also laugh at the craziness that comes with raising a tricky kid.
Steffi and I started this podcast because we're raising tricky kids. And I love that phrase. It's Stephanie's phrase. She's going to explain it in a minute. We've tried over the years to use social media to be transparent about what a shit show our lives are, with the idea that hopefully people who look at those shares on social media can see that they are not alone. It's not just them. There are a lot of people out in the world like us.
Absolutely. I think social media is so cool, and I love being able to connect with all these people in my life. But I think the tricky thing is once you become a parent, or really, I guess if you're anybody, you look at it and people are posting the highlights of their life and the most magical things that happened to them that day. And the picture that they got where the kids were actually all looking at the camera and not punching each other or whatever. And I think the unhealthy part of social media for me has always been, God, it looks like everybody's doing great. And my kids are a nightmare. Over the years, I've not felt comfortable going to the zoo with my kids, it turning into a shit show, and me posting 3 pictures that makes it look like we had the most fucking magical day ever. Because it wasn't. I mean, the memory of that day was magical, and maybe there were a couple magical moments in there, but I'm lying to the world if I post that we just had this perfect day. So, and then, we have tricky kids, and it just makes me feel like even more of a liar if I just make it sound like all we do is like decorate Christmas cookies and snuggle.
Right, because someone needs to learn from my life experience.
Right. What am I doing this for if I can at least?
Right. Why should other people be doomed to repeat my mistakes? So I love the term tricky kid. Stefanie, why don't you tell us how you came up with it and what it means?
Okay, so I don't really remember when I started using the word tricky kid, but basically I use that as a shorthand when I'm meeting people or at Meet the Teacher or at the park, and maybe my kids are doing something that might be a little more outrageous than your average kid. First of all, it's not time to say, okay, so just, he has ADHD and he has anxiety. And so the reason that he's acting this way. So I usually make eye contact with the person and say, okay, so that's my trickiest kid. And it really, I just think, covers a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you're like at back to school night and hi, here's the teacher. And, you're being all excited to be there. But I also kind of want to be like, hey, real quick, you have a second. I just want to let you know that while this child is wonderful and delightful and so super sweet, he's also really tricky. And usually they look at me and kind of get it. And so it's a way of not listing a bunch of diagnoses and making that who my kid is, because that isn't
right.
who they are, but also acknowledging like, I see what he's doing. Maybe his behavior is not ideal. We're all going to be on the same page. We see it. We see what you're seeing without being disparaging to my kid.
Yeah, because shame, man, I've learned over the last 12 years, shame is something I avoid at all costs. And I didn't always know that. I certainly know it now. And so a tricky kid, it's a fairly neutral term that hopefully doesn't come with shame. I know exactly what you're talking about. The back to school nights where you get a minute and a half with a teacher and you just want to do a mind meld with them.
Yes.
So that they can know all you know, just because I want the environment to be comfortable for my kid. Right. And so in lieu of a mind meld, I think tricky kid at least gives them a heads up that, oh, okay, this kid's special. And maybe I need to reach out to this parent, caregiver, adult, and have a chat.
Well, yeah, and it also kinda gives the person a clue that you are in on it, I mean, I taught
Mhm.
high school for all of 2 minutes 2 years. It felt like 5,000,000 years. And it was a very long time
Mhm.
ago, but, when I would reach out to a parent, I really kinda never knew what their thoughts on the situation were. So,
Mhm.
I mean, there were parents I called and I'd be like, "Oh, Johnny's doing," and a couple times they'd go, "We get it, like, we know all about that, so what's, like, the latest thing?"
Yeah, so
Um,
what's up?
so
Mhm.
me being able to say, like, I know he's tricky and, contact me, and then we can skip the it's awkward, like, you're telling me something maybe I don't already know about my child.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just kinda like, we're all in this together.
Yeah, let's collaborate.
Yeah,
Let's collaborate. Let's problem solve. We're the grown-ups. That's beautiful when you get that. Now that we've talked a little bit about what a tricky kid is, I want to talk a little bit more. And Stephanie and I are being very intentional about giving you just a little bit about our kids, us, why we're doing this. There's so much more. And we'll get into that over the next, hopefully, many, many episodes. But just to clarify, Stephanie and I didn't even know each other. We knew each other
right.
through social media, but we didn't even know each other until Stephanie reached out and said, "Hey, I have a friend who could use some support. Would you mind talking with her?" Stephanie and I kind of tag teamed her friend who was having a challenge with a local school district. And while we were doing that, we both discussed that we did that all the time.
Yeah,
That we would. So it's funny, and Stephanie's talked about this um, a lot, and so have I. We'll post something on social media on Facebook or I had a blog for a while, and very few people will actually comment, but they will direct message me or text me or call me and say, "Thank you so much for posting that. We have a similar situation in our house, and it's so reassuring when you post openly about it."
yeah,
And so Stephanie and I decided we were tired of doing one-on-one like
right.
advising. I mean,
Well,
that's what I
and
call it.
yeah,
I'm tired
totally.
of it. I shouldn't say
And
that.
it's more like there's these silos of people out
Mhm.
there that you learn really quickly when you go out to dinner with friends or you're at a PTA meeting or whatever, that you can get some wild looks from people if you
Mhm.
even share that, like, yeah, today my kid told me to fuck off and he's 9. Um, and
Or my favorite, "You're a mean white bitch." That's and I'm like, "I am, honey, but I am your mean white bitch, and I
that's
am
right.
here for you."
Just
And,
as an
yeah.
aside, so Shelley is white and her children are black. So that's the perspective that
Yeah,
comment is coming from,
that's
I
probably
assume.
relevant. That's probably
Yes.
relevant
Yeah,
context.
but I, kinda got to the point where I knew the handful of people I could talk to about what's going on in our lives, and I think one of the hardest things is my children, thank God, reserve most of their most outrageous behavior for at our house.
Yeah.
So when we're out places, they look like perfect little angels, and in a lot of ways they are, but when they're dysregulated and their frontal lobe is no longer making great decisions. And now we're just in, there's fight, flight, or freeze, and mine tend to just fight. And they save it for home, but it's pretty volatile. So I think it was making me so sad that I knew there
Mhm.
were other people experiencing this because I would, talk about how I was reading the book, The Explosive Child, and reading the whole thing with just like tears coming down my face. Because, first of all, you don't really want to pick up that book and be super relating to it. You hope that you're like, oh, this doesn't happen at our house. And
I
instead,
know.
I'm like, yep, does that, does that, does that. And I
You're like,
posted about
"Ba-boom,
it.
ba-boom."
And, I'm reading this book and I'm kind of crying while I read it. And
Mhm.
I had multiple people reach out to me and say, oh, I'm reading that book too. And it's just good grief. If
Yeah.
every 10th person is dealing with this, but they don't feel like they
Mhm.
can talk to anybody about it, you're just so alone.
Oh,
And,
yeah. And let's talk about shame, and I'm gonna talk about shame a lot. I don't have a mental health credential. This is probably a good time for us to say, we are not experts. We have lived experience as parents, um, but I, goodness, the shame that adults feel, the guilt and shame that adults feel about not being enough for their kids, not being able to provide everything that their children need is just, there's so much weight there. It's so substantive. I've had friends whose marriages have ended. And I am not blaming the kids for that. That's not what I'm saying.
Well, it's the stress and trying to figure out what to be doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in a situation that is very extreme and high
Mm-hmm.
pressure. And our house
Yeah.
has required a lot of hypervigilance. And
Mm-hmm.
when it's calm, we'll kind of come up with a game plan. And then in the moment, of course, we're human beings and we're supposed to be,
Unfortunately,
yeah,
sadly,
we're supposed to be so
sadly,
calm. And then
sadly,
we're
we're
not.
fallible.
And then afterwards, that's the kind of the thing you fight over. It's like, I thought we agreed we weren't going to yell or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I mean, it's kind of the only thing that my husband and I really fight over
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
how to quote unquote fix this.
It's hard.
Um,
Here's where I should jump in and say I adopted 3 kids as a single person. I fostered first and then adopted, and people would say, gosh, Shelley, I just don't know how you do it. And I'm like, let me tell you how much easier it is when it's just me, because my friends who are married have to manage all while maintaining a healthy relationship. And in some ways, it's a lot easier. I'll say I very intentionally, 12 years ago, 14 years ago, however long I've been parenting, I very intentionally made a deal with the imaginary devil, because I don't actually believe in hell, to share openly about the lack of opportunities my kids had in an effort to change the world. And I know that sounds very big and pretty arrogant. I was very frustrated with how few resources there were, especially around mental health. I was very frustrated with systemic racism. I was very frustrated with just almost everything about the world. And the more I told stories, the more people were engaged and listened and said, oh, you know what? I never thought of it that way. And so I have very intentionally told stories in an effort to change awareness. And my kids are adults. My youngest is 17 now. And I know that they have resentment and probably always will have resentment. Well, I don't know that. They say they don't. And let's not second guess our adult children. But it is a delicate dance. And we're both very aware of that. So please don't make comments that we're terrible people for talking about our children. We already
right.
know we're terrible people. And we don't need to be
We're
reminded.
terrible people trying our best. But also, I just can't even tell you that how meaningful it would have been for me during this journey to have a community of people that I could say, I don't know what to do. This is how my kid's teacher is treating him, or I'm trying to advocate for a 504 plan for him so that he can have accommodations. And I don't have, like, no one in my circles, kids, have accommodation plans or IEPs or can sympathize. You know, I have friends that they're like, oh my gosh, no, this school district has always been so great for me.
It's
But
so great.
they
Yeah.
have neurotypical children, which I mean, I am jealous. They have neurotypical children. So if their
But then what
teacher,
would you do with your time, Stefanie?
what would I do?
What would you do?
I don't know. I might take a nap. So you just feel like, oh my God, is this only happening to me? And there's no need for all the people that are going through similar situations to feel like they have to go it alone. And a lot of the resources out there are so damn boring. And it is hard. Like when yes. I mean, when I started to suspect that I have 2 out of 3 of my children have ADHD. When I started to suspect they had ADHD, like I am just a very proactive researcher. I'm going to become an expert on this. And one of the ways I did that was I found the expert, Dr. Barkley, who is like kind of the world-renowned expert on ADHD. And I watched a 10-hour YouTube video that he gave on like a weekend to parents on ADHD. And lucky for me that my job, I'm driving a lot. So I didn't watch the YouTube video. I had it playing, but I spent 10 hours just trying to learn about ADHD. And it was not a very interesting talk, but I just wanted the information. And one of the things, you know, because I consume a ton of podcasts, I went kind of looking for more info. And I mean, listen, I haven't clicked on every ADHD podcast, so maybe there's some out there that are sensationally entertaining. But the ones I found were like, so welcome to the show. Today we're going to be talking about
Written
ADHD.
a very
And
gentle
I
voice.
was like, I can't do this. And I don't have
I
ADHD.
know.
And ADHD is genetic. It is passed down through generations. So there's a ton of adults out there actually that realize that they have ADHD when their children are diagnosed.
Right.
And we can't
Exactly.
expect those people to listen to some boring ass podcasts to get information and learn. Like we got to jazz it up a little bit.
Not to disparage lovely experts who are talking about things, but there was definitely an opening in the market, shall we say, for a straight talking, saucy, hopefully humorous podcast about tricky kids.
Well,
to telling
so just
stories.
really quickly though, the thing that makes your kids tricky, of course, is that they were brought into your house when, you know.
Yeah, so let me talk about that. I'm going to give a very short explanation of what makes my kids tricky kids. And let me say this. When we say our kids are tricky kids, I really wish we could say the world is tricky because, the world doesn't fit kids like ours. I don't want to put the blame on the kids, and it's hard to use language in a way that doesn't sound that way. So,
but the truth of the matter is that we go around using terms like neurotypical and neurodivergent. But for instance, 1 in 13 children are diagnosed with ADHD. That doesn't even include the number that like people miss because the kids are capable of somehow getting through life without the diagnosis. So we're acting like there's just one kid at the school that has ADHD when it's actually like in a classroom of 30, it's like maybe 3 of them have ADHD. Or trauma or whatever the thing is.
A million other
but we're
things.
acting like everybody needs to be in this little narrow box when really it's like, why aren't we working for 20% of the population that's got these different diagnoses?
And I do see that shifting. It's not shifting fast enough for me, but nothing shifts fast enough for me. And hopefully what we're doing, what other people are doing will change that. So, okay. So a brief overview of what makes my kids tricky kids. First, they're awesome. We just say that. They are awesome. They're little badass. Secondly, they went through hell and back in their early life. I'm not going to disparage their biological family. I am grateful to their biological family for bringing them into the world and doing their best. My kids, for anybody who's familiar with the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experience Assessment, my kids are 10 out of 10. So they're overachievers. They okay, here's the other thing. Stefanie and I are going to laugh about things that normal people would cry about. Okay.
Well,
so
you just
when we
laugh,
yeah.
If we
didn't,
didn't,
you have to.
I would be. I don't know where I'd be. I often joke that I'm going to run away to Mexico, but I mean, you have to.
We're going to talk a little bit more about this later on, but yeah, we'd both be curled up in a ball somewhere. So we laugh about things because you develop a really dry sense of humor when you're dealing with kids like ours. And we are going to laugh at things that probably a lot of you would not laugh at. It doesn't mean we think they're really silly. It's just dark humor is what gets us by. So
I actually think that people who are in our community will be laughing too.
Well, that's
true. Do you know what I mean?
No.
It's the people who, like, if the title of our podcast, Where the Fuck Is My Village, has you like clutching your pearls, then this might not be the podcast for you.
Right.
And I don't want to turn away listeners.
No, please.
But we're going to be really frank, and we want people who are experiencing things that are similar to us to be able to laugh about it. Just like somebody else might laugh, like, oh, I hate sharing a bathroom with my teenage daughter. She's in there forever. Like that. We laugh about that. So we need to be able to laugh about these other situations we're all going through. I'm not laughing at the time, for sure.
Well, and you know what's funny? That's a really good signal to me that someone is my people. If I'm in a group of people and something super off color happens and we both laugh hysterically, I'm like, oh, that person's my people.
Let's be friends.
So anyway, okay, kids, 10 out of 10 on the ACEs. They came to me at 3, 6, and 9. They'd been in the foster care system here in Oklahoma for about 2 years at that point. The 2 oldest have something called a reactive attachment disorder diagnosis. And when you say that to people who are in the mental health field, they go, that's
a big one.
It's a big one. It is, I had one therapist ask if he could write his thesis on us because
Okay.
um, my kids had not stabbed me to death in my sleep. And he felt like there was something that I was
Like,
doing
look at
that
you
was,
not getting stabbed to death.
I know. I
Good
was like,
job.
correct. I mean, um, and we're laughing, but there's a lot of violence and rage that comes with the reactive attachment
Well,
disorder unit.
because they
Diagnosis.
I think the reason that it's such a big, scary diagnosis is because the
Hmm.
basis for newborns is
Yep.
connection. And when you,
Attachment.
yeah, and
Hmm.
this attachment, and when they're 6 and they've never learned that, this isn't
Yeah,
even you have to go back to the beginning
it's
and
bad.
try. Yeah.
Well, and I'm going to give a layperson's understanding here, but not only have they not attached, but they view attachment as a threat. And
Yes.
so here I come as adoptive mom with those kind of innate nurturing kind of urges. And those kind of intuitive parenting things are the really wrong things to do with my kids. And they actually result in some pretty difficult behavior. So anyway, 2 oldest have reactive attachment disorder. Both of them were inpatient psychiatric care for 8 months, I think was the longest. And then both of them had multiple stays of like 30 to 90 days. We'll talk more about that in lots of episodes. That was certainly not easy to do. My youngest doesn't have a diagnosis because no one can figure out what it is. He is an enigma rolled up in a, heck, that phrase is that saying. And then 2 of the 3 have been involved in the criminal justice system. They also are Black. And if you're a white person, gosh, I thought I was a progressive white person until I became the parent to 3 beautiful Black children. I just had no idea. So that's it's obviously a huge, huge topic to discuss. I think that's it. What am I leaving? Oh, running away, quite a bit of running away. And then my oldest daughter became pregnant and gave birth at 19. But let me tell you, statistically, she should have been pregnant at 13. And so I was thrilled to death that it was 19 and that she had a healthy pregnancy. And I'm now actually raising my granddaughter for the last just over a year. So I think that's the
Well,
short story on my
I think
kiddos.
that's it. It's a 14-year history that we're going to talk more about and about
A
specific
lot. Yeah.
things,
That's the gist, though.
advocating how to find a good attorney, how to manage all of these things, how to deal with
Oh,
the
gosh. Yeah.
police when they're called. And we'll get into
Should
those
you,
things.
yeah.
Yeah.
Should you take your kid to the ER or should you call your client, the hospital CEO, and ask him to talk to his emergency room docs? Like,
Right.
that's the other thing. We both have tons of privilege. Both of us have tons of privilege. And I don't know, I'm guessing Stephanie feels the same way. There are so many people who don't. And so I feel like I have a duty to be talking about this stuff.
Well,
A
sure.
responsibility.
You know, I was raised in a family that my parents are not doctors. My dad was an attorney and my mom was a teacher. But we were the type of family that, like, if your doctor prescribed you a medication, this was pre internet, we had a book that was like the medical guide to every medication, and you'd go look it up and we would learn about it. So there was a
Wow.
lot of like self advocating and being partners with doctors that was modeled for me since childhood. And then my
Yeah.
dad had heart related issues. And so we were at the hospital like once a year with doing
Oh, goodness.
something or
Okay.
having
Mhm.
he had 7 heart attacks before heart disease finally took his life 2 years ago. But
Mm,
we were there a lot. So I was in like a
mhm.
medical world talking to experts. We believed in researching. My dad would go to his appointments knowing just as much as the surgeon did about what procedure they were going to be doing. So having that modeled for me my whole
Mhm.
life, when we started going down this path, I felt like I needed to be in partnership with these people and that I needed
Oh,
to be an
goodness, yeah.
expert. So my kids have diagnoses of ADHD and generalized anxiety disorder, which means like everything makes you anxious,
Mhm.
and sensory processing disorder. My son is a sensory seeker, so he can't get enough. So he's not like covering his ears or hates lights. It's more like the more lights, the more loud. Like he goes to sleep at night with his speaker playing Fits in the Tantrums. And that is like some jazzy music. And then he's going to go to sleep. Anyway, so you and I have spent all of this time researching and researching, and not everyone, I mean, listen, if you're working 3 jobs, you don't have time to listen to a 10-hour podcast on ADHD. So what we're hoping is that we can kind of use our knowledge for good and the progress that we've made. And listen, my kids are still a work in progress.
So are we. I mean, I think
Oh,
that's
yeah.
really important to say. I mean, I've changed more than my kids have because, oh my gosh, I was an idiot when I first became a parent. I was so damn ignorant, which is probably a good thing. If I'd known what I was getting into, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Well,
Yeah.
listen, when my oldest son, when his third grade teacher called me and was trying to tell me that she thought he had ADHD, but she can't really legally say that
Mm.
because she's not a doctor. She's calling me, and all I could think was, aren't kids with ADHD the kids that like really misbehave? My son is very obedient. And what is this label? And I had an idea of what this disorder or diagnosis, I hate the word disorder. It's not a disorder. It's just a different way of the brain working.
Language is
But
tough, man.
I just didn't, God, I didn't know anything. I mean, listen, I discovered
Mm.
that I have anxiety about 5 years ago from a BuzzFeed quiz. So I didn't even, I was walking around. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, thanks, BuzzFeed. I
Thanks.
was like 45 signs that you have anxiety or whatever. And I clicked on it and I'm like, yep, 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 yep.
It just occurred to me while you were talking. I think it's important to disclose I have complex PTSD, which I learned in the last 5 years. I started reading Brene Brown to better understand my kids and learned a lot more about myself than I did about my kids. I think it's important to be open about our own mental health as well as our kids.
One of the reasons we're doing this podcast is that my therapist for like a year has said, you need to do a podcast. Do a podcast, please. I don't know what it says about me or my therapist that my therapist has been wanting me to do this, but that's also me revealing that I'm in therapy. And it's incredibly helpful and I love it.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm not overstating this. I don't know that I would be alive without therapy for the last 25 years. I had some touch and go moments in my mid 20s. And, I have a box of awards in my attic. I mean, to the outside world, I look like I have it super together, blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you, overachievers, I don't trust overachievers because you never know what it is they're trying to prove.
I'm an overachiever. Uh-oh.
Well, as am I.
So today's like little topic that we're going to talk about is the dumb shit people say to us. And how we've responded, how maybe somebody else could respond. I think it's also important for the people maybe who have said some of these dumb things to hear, oh God, maybe I shouldn't have said that. I think the first one is I don't know how you do it. I get that a lot just because I have 3 boys. I don't know how you do it. And we don't have a choice. There's no like opt out button, first of all. And I always jokingly say that I have tried to resign multiple times from this position, but I can't accept my resignation.
I think it's important to say that a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, people say without thinking about it.
Yes.
And I probably did the same thing before I was a parent. I said stupid shit all the time because it's something that you hear other people say. It seems logical when you say it, but so much of what we're going to talk about today is just hurtful or at least at a minimum, not empathetic. And
no,
so,
it's not. It's more like you're like a circus act. I mean, having 3 boys, if we're walking. Yeah. And I'm sure you get this. So I'm sure walking through Target with 3 Black children, you're a spectacle. And walking through Target with 3 boys is a spectacle, frankly, because people are kind of seeing the dumb, things they're doing. Like they might be getting ready to get in a fight. And then I say something. And of course, if you're the person that's watching, it's cute. And you're kind of seeing this little sitcom or whatever unfold in front of you of these 3 boys. And but it's literally like people being like, whoa, I'm not you. Look at what you're dealing with.
It's sort of a backdoor compliment, I think, in their minds. But,
and they're saying it in front of my children.
In front of the kids.
So then what do I say?
That's what pisses me off.
Oh, you're right. This is fucking hard.
Yeah,
I'm in
this is a real burden.
I'm in the checkout at Target. Or I get, you going to try for a girl? You going to try for a girl?
Again?
And listen, I desperately would love to have a daughter. Okay. And we definitely did our best and read the stupid books on how to make a baby girl. Okay. But at the same time, I'm not going to stand in Target with my 3 kids and say,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, God, these losers over here, I sure need to keep trying. It's just,
Exactly. I mean,
what are
that's what's
people
amazing to
saying?
me is that people say it in front of the kids. Like, if they just said it to me, I'd be like, most of the time I would just blow it off. But they say it in front of the children, and both of us have kids that need support, not criticism from strangers.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
saying that to you, they might as well say, "Well, your life is really fucking hard because of
Yeah.
these tiny humans."
I mean,
Um,
I get like, my God, your house must be a nightmare. And I'm like,
yeah.
well, and it kind of is, but at the
But
same
just
time,
stop it.
I just don't know
So
how to react. You know what would be a better comment? And I
mhm.
have gotten some of these before. You're doing a good job, mom.
Yes,
That,
yes,
and they just see you doing a good
and
job. And
just
that's what they
believe
mean, I
it.
think, maybe when they say, I don't
Mhm.
know how you do it, because they're like, that looks hard. I
Yeah.
mean, listen, I took all 3 of my kids at the same time to the dentist on Monday,
Mm,
and I'm friends with the dentist, and it's still stressful to me that I have all 3 of them
of
there at the
course
same
it
time.
is.
It's a
Yeah.
time saver. Otherwise, it's like half a day per kid if you take them separately. And we're in the elevator, and, the other people in the elevator are watching us.
Mhm.
I mean, I can
Mhm.
feel them watching us, and my kids are playing
Yeah.
with their toy or whatever. And
Mhm.
it's really hard to, I don't know. I think,
It's I mean, to your point, I think if you wanna say something, if you don't have to say anything, right?
sure,
If you wanna say something that truly is supportive, you can, and I've done this when someone is out and they have a full family, right? Let's call that.
sure.
I was on a plane with a woman who had a baby in arms and had a kid in a car seat. And I don't know, they were maybe 11 months apart and she's on a plane with them. And so I very gingerly said, "Do you want some help when we get off the plane?"
Oh, I love that.
And she said, "I would love some help." And I said, "What kind of help would be the most beneficial without like overstepping?" And I'm maybe a little overly careful with my words because I know that they matter. We deplaned onto the tarmac, and it was one of those situations where you're pulling your own suitcase off. Um, and so she said, "Would you hold my baby?" It's
Yeah.
like,
Well, she
of
knew you
course,
couldn't get far with the
of
baby.
course. That's true. She didn't trust me with her suitcase.
Right.
Um, she's like, "Would you hold the baby while I get the car seat,
Yeah.
set up?" Yeah, of course I'm gonna hold your baby. Of
How much
course.
more helpful is that than, whoa, like, you've got your hands full, or whoa, you're brave.
Yeah.
I mean, because if the woman getting onto the plane by herself with 2 children, already people are
Mhm.
looking. And then the
Well,
fact that they were little.
yes.
Well,
Um,
which brings me to the next thing people often say to you, which is, you're a saint.
oh god. In fact, I have friends who know this and do it to me just to mess with me. So yeah. Well, that's kind of the same thing that people are saying to you, like, I just don't know how you do it. Oh, you're Shelley, you're a saint. Well, no, I'm not a fucking saint. I mean, I became a parent in a very intentional way. It took me a couple of years to come to the decision. I messed up so many ways, so many different
Sure.
times. I get more out of being a parent than probably a lot of my friends with biological kids, neurotypical kids. I mean, my life is incredibly rich because, oh, and I'm going to start crying.
The
Damn it.
successes are that much sweeter
Well,
when, I mean,
yeah.
these tiny, even if it's tiny. I mean, my middle son has finally learned
Mhm.
how to articulate how he feels. And the day before school started this year, he said, Mommy, I feel anxious about going to school tomorrow. I feel nervous.
What?
It almost
Oh.
burst into tears.
Mhm.
Buddy, he goes,
Mhm.
when you feel worried, does your tummy feel weird? And I was like,
Oh gosh, I
oh,
love that.
yeah, my tummy feels weird. My body kind of feels like I'm
Mhm.
And he's like, yeah,
Mhm.
that's how I feel.
Oh my god,
It's
that's
taken
amazing.
like 7 years of intervention and coaching and
Yeah.
active building with him for him to be able to say that.
And
The
then it just
victory,
boom. Yeah.
yeah, it's unreal.
Yeah.
So the
Well, I
victories are
mean,
that much
yeah.
sweeter.
And I get it. I mean, I don't even know what people think they're saying when they say you must be. I mean, it's sort of like what they say to you. Like they're trying to say they respect you, or they're trying to say that you've done a good job. But instead of saying, gosh, I respect the hell out of you, or hey, good job, mom.
Well, and it's
Yeah, they do the
also,
whole
I
you're the
you know
same
what I
thing.
think these comments are, is they don't think they could do it.
It totally, totally. It's so separate from their experience, or they think it is. And so one of the things that I say is, what I just said to you, I'm really not. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I get much more out of being a parent than my kids get out of being parented by me.
So my next one is, I really hate the phrase, God will never give you more than you can handle. I I really hate that it is applied to literally any situation.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I basically, like, spent 5 million hours as a child at church. I was on the mime
Mm,
troupe. I was in the handbell choir. I was there constantly. And I can tell you that this quote is not from the Bible. If this isn't true, somebody who
mhm.
likes to make signs came up with this phrase, and it is tossed around to people under any circumstance. And what it does is it teaches people, I feel like, that, I mean, that no
Teaches people
matter.
to be martyrs.
Well, yeah. Well, and also just to say,
Mhm.
well, I should be able to handle this because obviously God put this plan together for this
Mhm.
complete nightmare. And it could be anything. It could be you lost your job, or you have to work 3 jobs, or your parent has cancer, or whatever. And the phrase, God will never give you more than you can handle, is not based on anything except for some American person just came up with it, I assume. And I
Well,
hate
I
it
mean,
because
it's pithy.
it makes you feel incapable. Because let me tell
Yeah.
you, more than once since I've had children, I have been on the floor
Mhm.
in the carpet with my face down bawling.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if someone
Yeah.
had said, well, I mean, you should be able to handle this because will never give you more than you can handle. I mean, it is more than I can handle a lot of the time. It
Well, and
is.
it also, I mean, there are people who become parents and adoptive parents via their churches, more and more now than it used to be. And one of the things that concerns me is sometimes when you make the decision to become a foster parent, it's not a good fit.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not a good fit for the kid or for you. And the best thing to do for everybody is to say, this isn't working, and we're going to relinquish this child. That's a really difficult thing to do, but it's one of those hard decisions that you make that is the best for
Yeah.
everyone.
I mean,
But
and yeah.
if you layer church into that decision, if you layer, well, God wanted me to do this and God wouldn't give me more than I could handle, then you end up keeping kids in really tough, potentially damaging, potentially abusive situations. Pretty sure that's not what God wanted.
Well, sure. And I think that what people who know a lot about fostering, and we fostered very briefly, that's a whole nother story. But so we spent a lot of time researching that and doing all of the training and everything. And one of the things that I was impressed with the training that they discussed with us was that you may have a placement that's a disaster for your household or for that child, but their next placement could potentially, like, maybe they need to be the
Mm-hmm.
oldest. Maybe they need to be the oldest in that household. Maybe they need to
Mm-hmm.
be the only kid. Maybe
Well,
they
or
need to,
group home, you know? I mean, when I was younger, I used to think group homes were the worst thing ever. By the way, my grandfather grew up in one. He grew up in the Baptist Home for Kids, which is an orphanage. We don't say orphanages anymore. We say group homes. But let me tell you, a group home is a great structure for some kids. Um, and yeah, so it's a damaging thing to say.
and
There's
people
nothing good
shouldn't
about
say
it.
it to anyone ever, whether
Yeah.
it's about parenting or they're going through
Mm-hmm.
some other crisis. When I see people like quote that on Facebook or whatever, I
Yeah.
just want to scream because it's not based. It's just somebody who just made it up. It isn't a real thing. You
It is
may
a
have
yeah.
days that you can't handle and you fall apart, or weeks or
Yeah.
months or entire years.
So what is our next one?
So it's
My
you
super
talking
favorite.
about, yeah, your kids are lucky to have you.
Oh, this is the one that I have a visceral response to. There's nothing lucky about any adoption story. I do not care what it is. Oh, and listeners, I cry at the drop of a hat. I am a hard, cold bitch, but I also cry at the drop of a hat. So if I do, sorry.
Well, when you're in a state of life that we're in, where like we're kind of operating at a 9 out of 10 all the time anyway, it's real easy to bubble over into tears, which is totally fine.
And I think I'm kind of wired that way too. But my kids their biological family was unable to parent them. That is a loss that they will never get beyond. That is possibly the biggest, most impactful loss anyone could have in their life. My father died when I was 2. I was pre-verbal, obviously. I mean, I'm smart, but not that smart. I know what it's like to have, I have my own attachment issues. I have my own abandonment issues. He was gone because of death, because of a farm accident, a very sudden one. My kids' parents were away from them, and then they had visits, and then they didn't, and then they went to a foster parent, and then went to another foster parent. I mean, it's just incredibly difficult and tragic. And so am I glad that my kids are my kids? Am I incredibly fortunate that my kids are my kids? Yes. No one in this scenario is lucky. If you want to go play the slots, that's a lucky situation.
Would it be better to say, I'm so glad they have you? Is that better wording?
So I get a little defensive.
Okay.
Or maybe a lot defensive. I am fortunate to have them. I am fortunate that my life is as rich and robust as it is because of my children. They are children. At a minimum, we as adults owe children safety, security. So what I'm giving them is literally the minimum that adults or that a community should be providing to children. And something to say is, what a great family you have, Shelley. Your kids seem really happy, Shelley. Your kids seem to be at peace. Because as a parent, that's all I want for my kids. I want them to be at peace. I want them to be comfortable in their own skin, that they are at peace, that they seem to be settling into their path. And I know that's probably more than people are going to think through. I wrote a blog post about this several years ago. I'll find it and we can put it on the website. That's probably a little more articulate than I'm being right now. If there's nothing else you take away from what we're saying right now, please stop saying that to adoptive parents. And please stop saying it in front of their kids. Please stop. Like you said earlier, Stefanie, that stuff is harmful. It's harmful, and it makes the kids very aware that they were rejected. And, it's like this Oliver Twist story in their heads.
And you're just trying to buy groceries. And now it's like all these interactions. Can I just go to the store?
Yeah.
And
could I go to Target? And it's very obvious with me and my kids because we are different colors. If we were the same color, it wouldn't be so obvious that they're adopted. It's at the neighborhood pool. It happens at school with other parents. Thank God it doesn't happen with my family. They know better.
Well, and I don't want to scare the whole world from talking to us or other people. But you know what? There are times when I don't know what the right thing to say is. So I just smile. You don't have to
just say hello.
You actually don't have to say anything.
No.
A woman can walk past you with 3 little boys at the mall, and you really don't have to involve yourself. You can just keep going to Eddie Bauer and buy your puffer coat. Like, you don't have to. You don't have, I'm not getting in what you're doing. You don't need to get in what I'm doing.
In each other's business way too much without really having any empathy about it. Like, if people had empathy, I'd be fine. And for those of you who are not sure how empathy is different from sympathy and pity, read about that. Brene Brown does a lot of work around that. And just a little bragging point, I read Brene Brown before she was super cool. Empathy.
Brene, if you're listening,
different.
We'd love to talk to you.
We would you would make, I don't know, my century. All right, let's move on. We've got some more unsolicited comments and advice from Stefanie.
Mine is just kind of a list. So I just have a group of people that I don't talk to about my
Oh.
struggles.
Mm,
Because they have said things to me like, "I'm so glad my kids don't have ADHD,"
mm.
like, in conversation with me. If I'm talking about like, "Oh my god," and then, because dumb shit happens, like, one time found a can of pink hairspray, and he and his little brother, like, spray painted the entire bathroom, and it
Okay, for
wasn't
the
great.
record, I think that's kind of amazing.
I mean, listen, everything washed off except for the
Mhm.
stained wood that still has hot pink on it. Um, but oftentimes, were we, like, really angry when it happened and so frustrated that there was hot pink sink and marble and tile and children and pajamas and everything? But later when I'm telling this story, it's funny. It's funny that my kids found this can of pink hairspray, sprayed everything, whatever. And for somebody to say back to me, "I'm so glad my kids don't have ADHD," or if one of my kids gets dysregulated. So dysregulation, I think I mentioned this earlier, is basically the fight or flight part of the kid or
Mhm.
any human comes online. And it's kind of like they've left the building. It's all
Yes.
emotion.
Oh, that's
There's
such a
there's no
good
thinking. They're not, I mean, I've told
no.
the siblings in my house, I have said, "He's gone. Like, you're still
Mhm.
trying to reason with him, and he's not here. Like, let's let
Mhm.
him calm down or let me calm
Right.
down because I've lost my mind and I'm throwing things or whatever." Um,
Mhm.
and I've told stories about, like, something that happened that morning, and one of my friends will say, "And then you guys went to the zoo later?" If my kid talked to me that way, they wouldn't get to go to the zoo. And
Oh
can I just
god.
tell you, we'd never go anywhere.
I
If
know,
every
right?
time my child got dysregulated, I took everything away. I mean, wha
I
it's
love that, I love that.
we
No,
we
I can't
wouldn't.
even I can't even tell you. I mean, thankfully, most of my clients know me pretty well, and I can't tell you how many times we'll get on a phone call or I'll do, a Zoom or a meeting or whatever, and they'll go, "How are you?" So if someone knows me well, I'll tell them how I actually am. For the rest of the world, I just go, "I'm good, thanks. How are you?"
Good, how
But
are
I can't
you?
I can't tell you how many times I've said, "Well, this happened today," and they'll be like, "Oh gosh, do you wanna reschedule?" I'm like, "Let me explain to you how if I rescheduled every time some kind of shit show happened,
Mhm.
we'd be living in a hovel because I would have no business."
Right. I
Like,
mean, that's the
that's not
thing.
a
We
thing.
just have to keep going, and the thing is like our children didn't choose to have these issues, and so we're
No.
teaching them. If my kid loses every privilege every time
Oh,
he
mm-mm.
his skills in regulating his emotions, um, aren't finely tuned, then
Mhm.
it's just the lesson we're teaching is terrible. Now, I'm not saying that there
Yeah.
aren't times where my kids receive consequences for their actions, for sure.
Mhm.
However, there's gotta be a lot of grace. Our kids get more
Yeah.
grace in certain areas than I
Mhm.
other kids do and where it is appropriate. And I think we're honestly constantly learning
What that
where
is. Oh
where the
god.
natural
Yeah.
consequence needs to be, where the grace
Mhm.
needs to be. And my kid would be like in a jail cell if I mean,
Oh, I know, I
he's a
know.
work in progress.
You
I mean,
you
we've
can't well, and that's a good lesson, and maybe that's something that we need to do a podcast on is, um, gosh, how you find that middle ground in terms of giving consequences, but not ramping up so high that you've taken all the furniture out of the rooms, you've taken the door off the hinges,
yeah.
and they can't watch TV or talk. They have to sit in an empty
Well,
room
and
for
that is
a month.
so tempting.
That
I
doesn't
can't tell
work.
you how
Yeah.
many times in my mind I'm like, "I'm gonna make his life so small.
Oh
He's
god,
gonna be
yes.
so
Mhm.
bored. I'm gonna." But
Mhm.
the
It
truth of
doesn't
the
work.
no, it doesn't work. I mean,
I've
and
done it.
yeah, I mean,
Don't do it. Don't do it.
it's
Learn.
well, and it's
Let me be a cautionary
right.
tale. Don't
If
do that.
if my child has the skill and they've proven the skill to do something and they've
Mhm.
chosen to do some dumb shit instead, then we're gonna go through the
That's a
consequences.
different deal.
Okay, so something else I've had people say to me, and honestly, it might be the most common thing I've had people say to me when I'm sharing about just some crazy thing that happened at my house or the way my kid talked to me. I've had people tell me that if my kid talked to me that way, I'd take my belt off and give him an ass whipping. Um, and I've had people say that repeatedly. Like, it sounds like your kid needs a beating. It sounds like you need to be swatting your kid. And in those times, I just want to be like, my kid has generalized anxiety disorder. He's scared of everything. I need to be on his side. And honestly, the last thing any kid needs is an ass whipping. However, absolutely not. It's not. Is it going to be helpful at all? It's going to make my child more fearful. And frankly, I don't have control of my emotions well enough for it to be. I've had people say, oh no, I wait till I'm calm. And then I come back and we give 3 swats or whatever. I don't love that. And I also will not be calm. So it's best I don't touch him when this is happening.
I think for my kids, I've also heard that. For my kids, I have to very calmly explain to people, and they're very well-intended most of the time. I have to very calmly explain to people that my children were beaten to the point that they have physical scars as well as emotional scars. My oldest has a scar on her face from the end of a extension cord.
Oh my gosh.
Extension cord scars on their backs. And I don't know what else. And so usually I get people's attention. I don't mention the extension cords unless someone just continues to push. And so the last thing that my kids need, and I'm laughing because, again, we laugh at things that, quote, normal people would not laugh at. That is the very last thing that my kids need. And to your point, attachment with your parents is a huge part of how your relationships form later in life. And so for the person you love and trust to be someone who also physically assaults you, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't.
And what I am dealing with is a situation where emotions in our house run really high sometimes. And like I said, with generalized anxiety disorder, the fear is of literally everything. And I think I said this somewhere else. If being more strict would solve this, we'd be there. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Listen, what needs to happen when he's being this way is he needs to be far away from me, not within.
Yes.
And it's just, I get so angry. I think I've gotten way better very recently in remaining calm. Partly by just kind of being out of my body in some ways and watching the situation and I'm trying not to take it personally.
Right.
Because the stuff that's coming at me, even though, God, he's really good at finding the thing to say.
Of course he is.
It's going to make me so upset.
So is every child ever.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, it's interesting how many times people have told me that I should just smack my kid. The thing about the tricky kid is there is no simple solution. Also, if I'm telling this story to somebody about what an awful morning I had because my son got dysregulated and we couldn't even get out the door and I am upset, I'm not sharing that with you so you can give me pointers on hitting my kid and solving it. That's not what that's not why I'm talking about it. I'm not like, so what should I have done? And then they tell me I should have smacked him. I'm just, if you catch me, I remember one time I had a big, one of those big seminars that everybody goes to, and we had a booth. And I had the worst morning that I'd had in months and months. I think it was extra worse because I thought we had made so much progress, and it was evident that I continue to think we've solved this, and it
Mm-hmm.
is not actually. I continue to relearn the lesson that this isn't solvable, really. And I was devastated. I was in tears. I had to collect myself in the parking garage, and then I went inside, and I was holding it together. But my manager needed to talk to me about something, and it was not a big deal. But I couldn't have a conversation right then, and I just like fell apart.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
lucky
Mm-hmm.
for me in that situation, this particular manager did not say anything stupid and actually offered me wonderful help. But that kind of thing happens to us, I think, a lot. Like, God, I feel like it's 8 a.m. and I have lived a life and haven't even started my day yet. Like, is
I
it?
felt that way this morning.
Yes.
We started this late because I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
It's
And
one of
so
those mornings. Yeah.
anyway, if someone ever, I don't know. I think it's the thing where people say, like, do you want advice or do you want someone to listen? Is a
Mm-hmm.
very important thing to say. I often say to my youngest, because, oh my God, he gets hurt a lot and there's a lot of tears. And so sometimes I say, are you scared or are you hurt? Because I'm trying to figure out what I need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
90% of the time he fell and it scared him, but he's not, I don't need to rush him to the hospital or something, but his reaction is so big. I can't tell. Are you scared or you
It's
hurt?
not an yeah, it's not an ER day. I actually
Correct.
do that with my clients. I do that with everyone. I say, what what do you want out of this conversation? Do you want me to listen? Do you want me to help you problem solve? Do you want me to support you in saying, yeah, what a jerk that person was? Like
Yeah.
what do you want out of this call? And or this conversation, and I think that's something that we can do with all kinds of people, but especially people, grown-ups who are raising tricky kids, because honestly, unless you're raising a tricky kid, you're probably not going to be able to problem solve.
Yeah. Let's hear about the other thing that you deal with.
Yeah, my favorite thing. So reminder, I fostered and adopted my kids as a single person. And also reminder, my kids are Black and I am as white as I could possibly be. I've checked. Ancestry confirms I'm the whitest person alive. And so what I started, and also reminder, there are lots of caveats here. Also reminder, we live in Oklahoma in the middle of the Bible Belt, on the belt buckle, right?
Yep.
So the thing that I heard, and I'm laughing already, the thing that I heard, I eventually stopped hearing it because my kids got older, was, Shelley, you need a church family. If you had a church family, your kids' behavior would improve and you wouldn't have all these issues. And two, you need to get a dad for those kids.
They just need a dad.
They just
Mm-hmm.
need a dad, and then their issues would improve. Or my favorite, you need a church family and a dad for your kids. Or you need to stop being white. That's also like,
Could you find
if
a
you
way
were,
to be more Black? Could you
I
find?
mean, and there is a little bit of truth to that last one. Like, clearly things would be easier if I were Black. It would be easier for my kids for sure. However, me magically becoming Black would also not solve all their significant issues. And so, another reminder, my kids had so much trauma in their early life that they are all 10 out of 10 on the Adverse Childhood Experiences scale. And 2 of the 3 of them have had multiple inpatient psych stays. All 3 of them have unfortunately been the subject of racism, systemic racism, as are all Black and brown people in the United States. And 2 of the 3 have been involved in the criminal justice system and so on. So, their behavior is not like, hey, they're not eating their peas.
Well,
I
you
mean,
can't oversimplify it, but the thing is, Shelley, is saying that having a church home would fix them really
mhm.
frustrates me because there are thousands, if not millions of parents that are really struggling that have a church home. And
Yeah.
many of them cannot talk about what happens at their
Mm.
house.
Yeah.
You
True.
know, a big
Mm-hmm.
thing with church, and, they often, everyone is welcome. We want to help you where you are. But usually when people share their hardships in a church setting, it's after everything's better.
Mm.
And it's, here's
Yeah.
my testimony. Here's the years and years of struggle, but now we're good. And
Yeah. Everything's
there
fixed.
are tons of parents suffering in a church environment. And I really hope that many of them are getting excellent support, but it
Mm-hmm.
isn't like the cure all for
Yeah.
anything.
A church home and a dad do not solve mental health crises.
Right.
A church, and let me say, this was my favorite time this happened. My oldest daughter ran away, and I don't remember how old she was, but not very old, 12, 13, 14. And side note, I thought I would have much longer with my kids before this kind of escalated crisis began happening. And I didn't. So 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there, she ran away. She was gone overnight. I was at my wit's end because it was one of the first times this had happened. I mean, after it happens over and over again, you get not used to it, but you know the drill, and you know when to freak out and when to sort of know that they're safe and they're going to come back home eventually. So she was gone overnight. I called all of her friends. They told me they hadn't seen her. I am doing the sleuthy thing that parents do. And goodness, parents of tricky kids, especially, we get really good at trying to figure out where our kids are. And I finally got a call from one of her good friends' moms, and she had been at their house the whole time. And let me say this. Don't lie to parents. I get it. I have sheltered all kinds of kids in my house, but I always pick up the phone and said, hey, so-and-so's here. He needs to cool off. If it's okay with you, we're going to keep him overnight. Let him cool off, because everybody, I don't care who you are, your teens are going to get hot. They're going to go, and they need a safe place to land where they can cool off and then head back to your house. And by the way, I've given that advice to so many people, and they always call me and go, you know what, Shelley, you were right. They hung out at so-and-so's house and they were back the next morning and we were able to talk about it. That's a thing. Do not lie to parents. Do not. Oh, just don't. So anyway,
So the
and this
mom
mom,
knew. The mom
actually,
knew.
mom didn't know, dad knew. So mom had been at work, or I can't even remember, but she got home and realized what was happening and realized that they had fibbed to me and was unhappy about it. And I can only imagine what she and her husband, I can only imagine what that conversation was like
I would have
later on.
lost my mind.
It's not fun. I mean, there's a reason my adrenal system has stopped working. So, and that's a whole other episode. We'll talk about health on a whole other episode, how this affects your mental and physical health.
Raising tricky kids is really hard on your body.
It
is, because that stress is running through you.
It's like cortisol. Cortisol is my friend. Hey, did you have fight or flight today? Because if you didn't, what's wrong with you? So anyway, so I go to the house, and this girl's dad, and this is a Black family. This girl's dad is standing on the front porch, and I had decided not to say a word. I had decided to get there, get my kid, and leave, because there's really no reason to try to explain to someone how vehemently you disagree with how they've handled your runaway child. I mean, like, and just modeling calmness is something that I realized eventually was the key to my kids' behavior. Was if I could stay calm and model that for them, they were more likely to be able to be calm. And so I was calm. Anyway, I unfortunately had to sit on the porch, or stand on the porch with this gentleman while my daughter gathered up her things and came out. And he said, you know, you wouldn't have these issues if you had a church home and a husband, and started lecturing to me on his porch after keeping my daughter overnight. And by the way, his oldest was in the house, grown man, didn't have a job, didn't pay rent, didn't like anything. And I knew this. And I just thought, Shelley, keep your damn mouth shut. And I did to a certain extent. But then eventually I said, well, I am just so glad that you have everything so figured out, because he was explaining to me how he did it and how everything was perfect at his house. Now, keep in mind, his mom, that was Freudian. His wife had called me to apologize and to out him, right? But everything's great at his house. I mean, anybody with any kind of empathy or compassion would be like, hey, this mom has probably had a pretty tough 24 to 48 hours. What can I do to support her? And he chose to instead attack me, although it was couched in support, right? Advice. I mean, so I did. I said, Mr. So-and-so, I'm so glad that you have everything figured out and that you've just got this whole parenting and life thing down pat. And I'm going to wish you well. And I'd like an award. I'd like an award for not telling him to fuck all the way off, because
I wish you well, sir. Fuck off.
Yeah. Like, take your, I mean, oh.
Well, it's so hard because in those situations, you have to tell yourself the objective is to not convince this person.
Well,
the objective is to get my kid home safely.
The objective is to stay calm, get my kid home safely, not have this situation repeat itself. And telling him off would not have resulted in anything positive.
Well, if anything, it would have fed his like, yep, yes, you're off the handle.
Yeah, she's a bitch. She's a Jesus-less bitch.
Sometimes people have to get really riled up and upset. And what's so hard is there's this like gaslighting thing where it's like, well, I mean, look at you. You're a wreck. And you're sitting there going, exactly. How do I calmly handle this? What you are saying.
Right. And let's think about that. There was no way I was going to fix whatever was wrong with him and convince him that anything was different than his worldview that day. And so I'm a little embarrassed that I got snippy with him. I'm not that embarrassed. And I do still want an award.
No, I think, I mean, being snippy is one thing, but you held it together and you were calm. And I think
barely.
I mean, I don't know if you deal with codependence, but I sure do. And yeah, I have to wander around going like, okay, I can't take this guy on. I can't take my responsibility to like really, I want to educate him. I want to email him some articles. We're going to talk about this. Like, you're going to understand me.
I'm going to send you an article. I'm going to text you.
Exactly. What's your email, sir?
It's a really helpful article that I feel like, and then let's have coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Because you know what's so hard is we're walking around, this guy aside, trying to prove to people our situation is real, that we're working our asses off to make it better, that we're not terrible parents because of our child's actions or behaviors. More than, I don't know, many other parents. I don't know. I just feel like there's like socially acceptable things to deal with your kids, which is, they won't do their chores. They won't hang up their towel. They mouth off back to you. Maybe they break curfew. And then there's, the bigger things like your kid threw a chair down the stairs is
right. Or your son stole a truck and lost control of it and ran it into a neighbor's house. That's not generally something you talk about PTA meetings.
No.
And let me say, I mean, I told the story about this gentleman, but that is That is a recurring theme. It is actually, one more story because this is just terrible. So, there was a gentleman who, I don't know if he pulled me aside or if he somehow just worked this into the conversation. He said, Shelley, those kids will ruin your life and you'll never find a husband.
What?
I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding.
Because they've like tainted your ability to find a man?
I don't know. I don't know. So there's so much wrong with that statement. Now, I am not a biblical scholar by any means. I already mentioned I'm a failed Unitarian, right? So clearly not a biblical scholar. However, I'm pretty sure Jesus is cognizant of the weakest among us. Pretty sure that's a thing. I know my husband could quote it. It's too bad he's not here right now. I have lots of friends who could, but the weakest among us, i.e. parentless children, fatherless children, probably need to be cared for.
Well, and the truth of the matter is that you can make the children yourself, like I did, and still have a hell of a time.
Oh, God, yes.
I mean, you just don't know what
do.
You're going to get. And there are plenty of people out there who have fostered and adopted and had completely different experiences than from what you may have experienced. But what the hell, man? Just to tell somebody.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
And just like, and we weren't even, I didn't ask him.
What does this have to do with anything, right?
It was just, he felt beholden to offer me his wisdom. So anyway, my point is,
and did he want you to like return them? I mean, you had them. Like, what is he? You know what? Is it too late? Is there a 90-day return window? Because
I mean, it honestly may have been while I was still fostering. Still, I mean, just there's just so much wrong with that statement. However, it's happened to me over and over and over and over again, and so just stop saying it, please. I mean, probably people who would say that are not listening to this podcast.
No, they stopped listening. Probably.
That's true. That's true. And
because we're probably still doing it wrong. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to see what you and I have accomplished that's got that mindset already. And they're not going to be like, oh, look at them turning that around. No, they're still having some tricky problems. Evans.
Yeah. So, darn it, if I just had a church home and a husband and gotten myself to church.
Well, you have a husband now. Is everything sunny? Is everything all better? And all the kids are like super well behaved and great.
Of course. All my
problem solved. It's fixed.
Yeah. All their trauma magically was wiped away when I got married the first time and also the second time. No, it didn't magically get better. No. So there you have it. Episode 1 of Where the Fuck Is My Village? We could use your help. We would like to build a following. So if you're enjoying what you're listening to, we'd love it. Leave us a review, and we would really appreciate it if you'd click subscribe. You can follow us on social media, and on our website, we will have links to all of our various social media where you can find us. We'd love to hear from you. We want this to be interactive. My hope is that there's millions of people raising tricky kids out there that can feel literally part of a village. Like, I'm hoping eventually we really cheesily, instead of saying the word listener, we say villagers. Like, oh my God, I love it. Let's do that now.
Okay, villagers.
Although it does sound a little bit YMCA-ish. Not YMCA.
It sounds like we're pilgrims. I don't know. But that's where I came up with this name for the podcast was because the saying is it takes a village to raise a child, and I don't have a fucking village. Now I got a couple people. I don't think a couple people adds up to a village. So, all right, we need to stop talking.
We're stopping right now.
All right, we're going to wrap it up.
This has been so much fun. We're going to be way funnier in future episodes and tell lots of fun stories, and hopefully be able to integrate you and your stories into those podcasts. We appreciate you listening, and we hope you find your village soon.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe to our podcast, and maybe even take a couple extra seconds to write a review so others can find us and join our village. We really want to hear what challenges you're facing and maybe even feature your comments and questions on the show. So if you'd like to contribute to our village, please leave us a voicemail at 918-409-0562. That's 918-409-0562. Or send us an email at wherethefismyvillage@gmail.com. Thanks, and we'll see you right here next week.